Hey guys, it's Nicole. I'm back with another video. So I don't think I've addressed it yet, but Happy New Year to everyone who celebrates there's the Chinese New Year that just passed, and then the other New Year that I know us in the US celebrate. So to everybody celebrating the New Year at any point this month in January, Happy New Year. It is 2025 and I am so happy that I am still continuing my YouTube channel and that I'm growing as a channel. I have surpassed 100 subscribers. So if you've subscribed to my channel in the last few months, thank you so much. I can't even express my gratitude like in words. It really means a lot to me to reach people from wherever you are around the world. I kind of started this not really sure what would happen. I wasn't even sure I'd get past 10 subscribers. So the fact that I've passed 100 is amazing to me, and I appreciate every single one of you. So thank you so much for subscribing and checking out my channel. Hopefully you get notifications every time I post a new video. I post every Friday morning. I hope this year to be doing a little bit more. Lately, my content has been about books as well as some pop culture and celebrity gossip. I plan to continue those types of videos, but hopefully I will be able to include some different kinds of content as well on my channel. This isn't the only thing I do, so this is not my full-time job, so I am kind of busy usually. So trying to figure out what kinds of content I can regularly make is a little bit difficult, considering I have just a lot going on in my life, honestly. But I appreciate every single one of you that comes to my channel. Even if you're not a subscriber, I still appreciate you coming and checking out my video, even if it's just for a little. Because, my content isn't for everybody, obviously. Like, no one's gonna like every single thing they find on YouTube. And that's okay, because that's just how the world works. That's just how people work. But I appreciate you nonetheless coming and seeing what kind of videos I make. So once again, thank you so much to every single person that watches my videos, subscribes, likes, comments. Even if it's not an amazingly positive comment, I still appreciate you interacting with my work, because this is at the moment a hobby for me. And it's just so great that I can realize that my content is reaching people from everywhere, even if you don't like it or agree with it. So this has been such a great ride so far, and it's only been a few months since I started my channel. So I can't wait to see where 2025 takes me. So now that we've got that out of the way, because I feel like I haven't addressed the fact that the new year has come and gone now, as of now. This video is going to be about a book. So I kind of go back and forth about what kind of content I make, and today's video is about a book. Like I've mentioned before in my other videos about books, I read a lot of books this past year, 2024. I actually read 35 books, which was the goal I set for myself on Goodreads. If you're on Goodreads, go ahead and look me up. I have my same name on Goodreads, and you can check out all the books that I've read, and because there's a lot more than just what I've made videos about. The ones I've made videos about are just my favorites so far. And I have a lot of other books that I like as well. These are just the ones that I read recently that were my favorites of the year. Not that they came out this year, but you know what I mean. So this is another book that I read last year, and part of my 35 books reading goal, which I finally managed to reach just a couple of days before the end of the new year. So I really got it in at the last minute. And the only reason I was able to do it is because I kind of read every day a little bit. I end up sitting with my cat. She lays on my lap, and I'll just read whatever book I'm currently reading, and that's how I get through so many books personally. I set aside the time to sit with her, and I'm like, I might as well read while I'm sitting here, because I can sit and scroll on social media on my phone at any other point. It's kind of nice to plan to read at some point during the day, because then I get to it. Otherwise I don't get to stuff. So if you're wondering, wow, 35 books is a lot, it is a lot, but I also really set aside the time to do it, and it just kind of worked out that way. So this particular book I picked up at Barnes and Noble because I am I like to have the physical book. So I like to go to Barnes and Noble every now and then. I don't go super often, but I like to go and I'll just kind of browse, and whatever titles like just kind of interest me and pull my attention are the ones that I pick up and read. I don't always choose those books, but it's always the titles that pull me in. So I picked this one up last year at Barnes & Noble. It is called The Mayfair Bookshop. It is such a fun book. I loved first of all, the title interested me because any books about a bookshop is always kind of funny, and like, it's kind of like Inception, like a book about a bookshop, you know. And then I look at the cover and I love it because she's sitting in like a little book nook, like with like a whole like stack of like books in the bookcase right here. And I don't know, there was just something very homey and calming about the cover, like the cover art. So I liked the title, I liked the cover, and I was very interested. So obviously what really led me to reading the book was the back of the book. So I'm going to read the description on the back first before I go into anything else. So there's 2 paragraphs, and the first paragraph starts with the year. It says 1938, and then there's a colon, and it describes what's going on in that year in this book. So 1938. She was one of the 6 sparkling Mitford sisters, known for her stinging quips, stylish dress, and bright green eyes. But Nancy Mitford's seemingly dazzling life was really one of turmoil. With a perpetually unfaithful and broke husband, 2 Nazi sympathizer sisters, and her hopes of motherhood dashed forever, Nancy finds respite by taking a job at the Haywood Hill Bookshop in Mayfair, hoping to make ends meet, and discovers a new life. The next paragraph is present day. Present day. When book curator Lucy St. Clair lands a gig working at Haywood Hill, she can't get on the plane fast enough. Not only can she start the healing process from the loss of her mother, but it's a dream come true to set foot in the legendary store. Doubly exciting, she brings with her a first edition of Nancy's work, one that has a somewhat mysterious inscription from the author. Soon she discovers her life and Nancy's are intertwined, and it all comes back to the little London bookshop, a place that changes the lives of 2 women from different eras in the most surprising ways. So yeah, it's a book that goes back and forth between the past and the present, centering around the bookshop. And I always love those kinds of books because it's one of the reasons I love The Longest Ride. I think that's the Nicholas Sparks one. Don't quote me on that, I'm not positive. But it's the past and the present, like she says, intertwining. And I always just find that so fun and cool. I don't know why. I guess the different stories and how things are similar and then different because of the times that they're in. And so that plot line alone was what really drew me to this book and why I definitely was excited to read it. And something that I learned completely accidentally was that, and I didn't know this, so there's nothing I didn't know that Nancy Mitford was a real person, a real author from England. I did not know that. This is a fiction book, and so I assumed that everyone in it was fictional. No. So Nancy Mitford is actually a real person, and it's true. She had 5 other sisters, and they were all kind of famous, and like they all had their own things, and more, I think at least one of her other sisters was also an author. And they all had like connections in high places, and so there's a lot of actual real truth and history kind of weaved into this fictional story because it's historical fiction basically. It's Nancy Mitford is a real person, and a lot of the things that happen in this book also happened to her in real life, but a lot of the like accounts and conversations, there's probably some artistic liberty taken there just because, I'm sure the author wasn't actually there, so I don't think she could actually quote exactly what the conversations were, what they were saying in the conversations. So, that being said, I really did not know she was an actual person, a real author. And I discovered that she was when I went to a used bookstore for my birthday last year. And I'm browsing through the sections, and my eye catches on a book that has Nancy Mitford as the author. That threw me because I thought she was a fictional person. So that was really funny. I ended up buying one of her books, and I'm actually reading one of them right now. It's 2 novels in one. It's called The Pursuit of Love and Love in a Cold Climate. So it's like The Pursuit of Love is one novel, and then it like stops, and then the next is like Love in a Cold Climate is like the second novel. And I was like, I have to read one of her books. I didn't know she was a real person, and this is a fictional version of her. So it's kind of cool that I'm like reading one of her books. So she is a real person. I did not know that. But obviously this book itself was definitely something I wanted to read. I just loved how... I also just love how it's like these 2 women that love books so much, because I relate to that. I love books. I love bookstores. I love used bookstores, Barnes & Noble. I love all kinds of bookstores, and I even love libraries. I love going to libraries. I'm just the kind of person that likes to collect books. I like having the books that meant something to me or that I really, really liked, because I can go back and read them, and I have them. And I don't usually write in books, but a friend of mine does, and she's like, do you mind if I write in your books when I borrow them? And I'm like, sure, because this just kind of like a little piece of her that she's leaving in my book for me. But that's why I go to those stores. I like going to all kinds of bookstores. I love books, and I think that's why I kind of related to this kind of story, because they're both bookworms, basically. Lucy, the present day character, is a book curator. She's not an author, but she loves books. That's why she does what she does. And Nancy Mitford obviously loved books. She wrote them. So that kind of drew me to this. And I really do love the intertwining of their lives through the same location, the bookshop. So, like I usually do, I'm going to read the first page of the very first chapter, just so anyone watching can get an idea of what it sounds like. I don't read past that. I don't want to step on anyone's toes with this, because I'm not sure what's like allowed. But I think reading the first page kind of gives people a little bit of a taste of what this book might be like if you've never heard of it before. Okay, so this paragraph from the first page ends on the next page. So technically it's like the same page, but the paragraph ends on the next page. So that's why I'm going to be turning the page. So this is chapter 1, and it says Nancy Mitford under chapter 1. So that's kind of how the author indicates who is speaking or thinking at the time, because a lot of it's like, you know, their internal thoughts. So, Nancy Mitford, mid-March 1931. Darling Evelyn, there is no place more perfect to wear a divine coral tiara than one's own fabulously orchestrated book launch party, especially when the evening crush is hosted by my own famous younger sister, Diana, Lady Guinness. Though I would have been happy to drink from a bottle running through the street dressed as a character in my book, my sister, you know how she is, has insisted on throwing a soiree and will no doubt outdo herself. A sentiment felt deep in my heart, since my parents have always looked down their noses at my prose. But not you, my darling friend, not you. Until then, love from Nancy. That's a letter. So now we're going into the actual, story. In the house on Buckingham Street, a stone's throw from the royal palace, golden light dripped from every crystal chandelier. Gardenias, roses, and lilies overflowed from dozens of Waterford vases. An 8-piece jazz ensemble played a mixture of the latest hits and older, less jazzy favorites, sure to get even the elder generation dancing. So that's the first page. Most of it's the letter to, so the letter obviously was written by Nancy to her friend Evelyn, who is also a writer, as kind of mentioned. And then it kind of goes into describing the party scene, because her Nancy's sister is throwing a party. So if it's something you're interested in, I really do highly recommend this book. I think it was such a fun read for me, honestly. It's just fun and fascinating, you know, just even though like one of these characters is completely fictional and another one was a real person, but a lot of this has some artistic liberties in it. It's just stories that intertwine just are always, like, they always attract me. And maybe you're like that too. So if that's something that interests you, I really think you'll like this book. I highly recommend it. It's by Eliza Knight. I don't think I mentioned that before. I know she's done other things. I was actually looking at her other books today in Barnes & Noble. And she actually, because it has a little bit of a bio of her back here, she's actually, it says USA Today best-selling author of women's historical fiction. So that makes sense. She writes women's historical fiction. So if that's something you're interested in at all, I highly recommend this book. I promise there's no spoilers. I just gave you now. As usual, I always give big notice before I go into actual spoilers. But yeah, that's kind of it for my thoughts, kind of, you know, review of the book. I'm gonna go into now some more details of the book, so there's almost definitely going to be spoilers from this moment on in the video. So if you don't want spoilers, now is the time to stop the video, and if so, thank you so much for watching. Now we're gonna move on to some of my other thoughts on parts of the book that are definitely spoilers. So there's definitely some romance in this book, because it's not a romantic book itself, but it is part of life. So it's part of these stories, which I kind of like. It's not about romance, but romance exists in life, so it's there, and I like that it's kind of just part of it all and not the center of it, because it's kind of really nice that way. So it's really interesting, and I have yet to look at any of the actual history of Nancy Mitford and this bookshop. So there's so much of this that I don't know is actually true or if it's part of the fiction. But in the book, one of Nancy Mitford's sisters, I'm trying to remember which one, I think it's Diana, the one that she mentioned in the letter, marries a Nazi, basically, in Germany, because it takes place in 1938 in England. We all know what happened a year and two later. But I believe it was Diana in the book that married a Nazi and ended up, oh no, I think it's Unity. Unity married a Nazi and moved to Germany and was becoming close to, you know, the higher ups in Nazi Germany, basically. I think even reaching Hitler, I think, for a little bit, like she even met him, kind of thing. And it's really interesting to read the descriptions of how ashamed Nancy felt, especially because of the view that it put on her, you know, because all of them had a little bit of fame, not a lot. It was in England, so it's not like they were famous worldwide, just in England. And it definitely cast a different spotlight on Nancy, one that she didn't support because she was not a Nazi supporter. And so they have, and again, I don't know how true this is, but in the book, their parents, you know, Nancy Unity's, the sister's parents, are kind of split on things. You know, their dad is very anti-Nazi, and he's you know, he can't believe this and la la la. And their mom she's not supportive of Nazi Germany, but she still loves her daughter, specifically Unity, because I think Diana also ends up going to Germany as well. I think they both end up kind of following that path, and loves her daughters and doesn't want to lose them, doesn't want to cut them off, doesn't, you know, she worries about them. And so she's kind of more concerned about that than anything else. And it's just interesting because I think Nancy's the oldest, and, you know, there's a lot of the book has to do with Nancy's, you know, romantic life, and even like it mentions on the back of the book, you know, not being able to have children. And, you know, she has more than one miscarriage. And in case that's something triggering to you, I want to let you know now there are, I want to say, 2 to 3, not super descriptive, but definitely noticeable parts of the books that at least somewhat describe miscarriages. So if that's triggering to you or bothersome to you at all, maybe you don't want to read this, or maybe you're just happy to know about it going in. But, you know, I really like how complex this whole family is, because they're all trying to stay together as a family, but in such a divisive time that, you know, England versus Germany, you know, back then in the 30s and 40s, you know, I like reading stories like that, because nothing's ever black and white, right? You know, it's never this or that. There's usually gray. It's not simple. And so, you know, the book doesn't detail how their mom felt necessarily so much about Germany and their, you know, the path they were going down towards, you know, fascism. Because her main concern, her main thing was trying to keep her daughters still part of the family, still around, at least in feeling, even if they weren't there in person. And even though their father obviously loved them, his beliefs were strong enough that he wasn't like cutting them off, for sure. He wasn't cutting his daughters off, but he was extremely vocal about how much he disapproved of that, what they were doing. And it's just, I really like that the family was written so complex. And again, like I said, I have no idea how it actually was between the family. They were all real people in history, so I don't know for sure. I haven't looked into that. But this is just how it was written. If you're interested, you can go look it up. I'm sure I will at some point. Like I said, I've been busy. But I do like reading these kinds of books just for the perspective, you know? I think it's a very interestingly beautiful human thing. It's humanity to be complex, right? I mean, nothing's ever that simple. You can disagree so vehemently with your family members about something, and yet there's still that pull, there's still that feeling of, but these are my family and I love them. And I think that I think it's a really good perspective to keep reading books like this that show it's not so simple, but they all still love each other. I mean, even towards the end of the book, Unity gets in an accident. It's a car accident. I think it was actually staged by the Nazi Party, because she did something that they weren't happy with. And again, this is all fiction. I don't know if that actually happened. And they brought her back to England. The family brought her back to England, and Nancy even like brought Unity over to her house. And, you know, she was still kind of, you know, healing from brain trauma, so she wasn't fully herself anymore. And so even though they had this horrific disagreement of values and just the way they think, obviously Nancy still loved her sister. And I'm not saying that's the right way to do things when you disagree with your family. I'm not saying that's how everyone should be. I think the point I'm trying to make is that families are complex, and that's why I really like the way they tell the story of this family in this book. And I think that's what really stuck out to me in this book. It does go into a lot with her marriage to her husband, Nancy's marriage to her husband. She called him Prod, but that was a nickname derived from his last name. His name is actually, I'm trying to remember because they just call him Prod all the time, so I'm like blanking on his actual name. Because his last name starts with Prod, and so they just called him Prod. But they do mention his name at least a few times in the beginning, for sure, to introduce. Okay, his first name is Peter. That's what it is. His name is Peter Rod, so they call him Prod. So that's Nancy's husband. And they talk about how they meet and how they get married. And it's a very interesting marriage. There's definite infidelity involved at numerous points. There's money problems, and they get worse because of Prod's gambling and other things that he's not good at paying people back, and you know, that stuff kind of strains things. And it's you know, but they never stop loving each other. And so I think even when they separate, I'm not sure if they ever actually divorce. I think they maybe just separate. Because Nancy ends up meeting someone, and like falls in love and goes, this is so different to how I felt with my husband. It's just wildly different. I'm trying to find his name, if I can find it, because I know it's here. She ends up basically, if I can't find his name, falling in love with a Frenchman and realizing that it just feels so different than her marriage to Prod. And she develops she kind of goes through this love affair with this man, and Prod's off with someone else. Like he's also involved in with someone else. So they're it's the kind of situation where they're not really willing to get divorced, especially right away. But they definitely don't want to be together anymore. And I think that happened a lot, especially like 100 years ago, you know, when divorce was definitely taboo. It was allowed, but man, did people frown upon it. So it kind of goes into that, and I just think it's such an amazingly written book of the complexity of human relationships. It's definitely about Nancy. Like the book details Nancy's experience from a fictional perspective, but it does so through the relationships she has with all of these people in her life. And the Lucy perspective, which is the present day woman who is the book curator going to the bookshop, her perspective is also interesting because she grew up loving, you know, the Nancy Mitford books, and she has this connection because one of the books she has was signed by Nancy Mitford, but it has an interesting inscription to a person that clearly never came and picked up the book because it was for someone specific, and the book just eventually sold to a random person. And so that's what Lucy is also there to figure out. She's there in the bookshop to do a job. Like, she's working from the bookshop to curate some books for someone back in America, but she is determined to find out who the person was that Nancy left that specific book for. And then we learn it's someone that Nancy got close to while working in the war, because Nancy volunteered to, drive ambulances and work the radios and that kind of thing, when London was being bombed. And it's someone there that she met. And it was a beautiful relationship between other two women that it was just a supportive relationship between the two women. And they never spent so much time together. They both volunteered, and so they were both very busy, working with the volunteer, but they were very close, The reason they got so close was one of the times that Nancy was having a miscarriage. They were staying at a house outside of London to kind of take a break from all of the, bombings and warfare. And I'm trying to find her name. I'm so bad with names. I'm really great with faces, but when I'm reading a book, I'm so bad with names. Sophie, that's her name. Sophie and Nancy went to stay at one of Nancy's friends' houses out in the country. I was going to say cottage, but it's bigger than a cottage, so house out in the country. And Nancy has a miscarriage, and Sophie just helps her up and says it's not your fault. And they create this amazing bond together through that incident. And Nancy had such a hard time in her life, especially with not being able to actually have children one day. And that was the special relationship created between the two of them. And so it was really, really beautiful when Lucy found out who Sophie was. Because the thing was, Nancy didn't inscribe a name in the book that she left for the person. She inscribed the nickname that she had for Sophie. And so there was no way to know who it was for. But through a little bit of digging, Lucy finally found it and actually contacted Sophie's daughter. And she was so grateful that she was able to get the book to the person that the book was actually for. So I think what's really so great about the book is the relationships with the family and the relationships that you can cultivate with other people that are not related to you, but they become your family in a way. And I think that's what's so beautiful about the book. So those are my thoughts about this particular book. I really recommend it. I don't think it's for any type of audience. I mean, yes, it's about relationships between women, but I don't think that should keep any kind of person from reading this book. I think that any kind of relationship should be loving and intimate in whatever sense of the word. Even relationships between men, best friends that are both men should also have their own forms of intimacy, the feeling of closeness and vulnerability. And I hope that books like this and other books like that make it feel more possible to have that kind of thing. Because I know that we still live in a time where it's still somewhat stigmatized for men to have close relationships, and I think that's horrible. I think that the best thing about being a human is the close relationships you can form with other people. And not to say that, men should only be close with men. Women can be close. One of my best friends is a man, and one of my best friends in the world, and thankfully he has a girlfriend now, and I'm very happy that he's finally found someone that actually cares for him. That's a whole other thing. But that's what I mean by I think anyone can and should enjoy this book. I think reading about the closeness of relationships and what vulnerability can bring you, the possibilities it can open up for you, regardless of who you are, where you're from, is really a big thing. And I think it's how we we'll open up ourselves and get closer to other people and even feel better in ourselves. So I highly recommend it to basically everyone. There's not really any sex scenes, I think, in this book, and it's definitely, you know, pretty PG with the language. The only thing is that there might be some complex topics. So for like children, obviously this may be too complex of a book, but I mean, if you're a young adult, a teenager, and you're interested in this kind of stuff, I think it's right up your alley for sure. It's just a very interesting story from two people's perspectives. So that is all for this week's video. Thank you so much for watching if you watched all the way to the end. I know that these videos can get kind of long, but I always have so much to say about the books I read. I like putting my thoughts in, and I don't know, maybe someday some people will comment. I would love to hear your thoughts. If either you have read this book or you haven't, regardless, I would love to hear your thoughts, anyone. But I love making these videos. So if you watched all the way through, thank you so much. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. That way you can get notifications when I post new videos. And like this video if you enjoyed it. Once again, comment if you feel comfortable doing so. Sometimes I'm not good with replying to comments. You know how it is, life just happens. But I do see them. So I appreciate everyone who interacts with my videos. I honestly do. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next week.